Reporting to you live from Jane Equipment. Today we're going to be showing you how to assemble your Stealth Pro 7 gallon a minute soft wash unit. We're not going to be using very many tools today, but we are going to be using a rubber mallet, flathead screwdriver, a pair of scissors just to snip off some zip ties. I have a 7/16 socket and a 7/16 line wrench. I'm also going to be using some pipe thread sealant. I actually recommend this over Teflon, so if you can, get yourself some pipe thread sealant. It's much better at waterproofing everything and making sure you don't get any drips or drops throughout the system. Alright, so when you first get your unit, it's going to come in 3 separate boxes. In box 1, we're going to have the frame with the pump and some hoses attached like so. In box number 2, we're going to have the hose reel. And in box number 3, you're going to have your yellow or orange ag hose. The very first thing we're going to do is we're going to pull everything out of box number 1 and get to work on that. Okay, so coming straight out of the box, it's pretty much mostly assembled. There's just a couple things we're going to do here. The very first thing I want to do is I want to locate this bracket that has my 3-way ball valve attached to it. And I actually want to pull all the hoses through the center here of the frame. And I'm also going to pull this bracket through the center. And that's me getting ready to attach it. It will attach right here. And you'll notice the hardware should already be attached to your frame. So I'm going to go ahead and loosen up some of this hardware. It will be 7/16. Most of the time we just leave them hand threaded on there for you, so it should come right back off. Once I get it off, I'm going to line my bracket up with the holes that I just took those screws out of. I like to have the handle up. And I'm going to run my carriage bolts through those holes. Once I get my carriage bolt through, we'll use one washer here and one nut. I'm going to repeat this process on the other side. One washer and one nut. I'm going to go ahead and grab my 7/16 line wrench. And tighten this down. One thing I want to mention is that this is an aluminum frame. You really don't have to go super tight here and kind of over torque it. We could crack the frame if we did decide to go crazy with the torque. One of the big reasons I enjoy using hand tools kind of eliminates that from happening. So once I got that on there nice and tight, no wiggles, feels good. Pretty much that's how you attach that. Moving on, we want to go ahead and attach the hose reel to the top of the frame. But before I pull my hose reel out, I'm going to go ahead and remove the hardware that I'm going to be using. Once again, the hardware is already attached to the frame. So I'm just going to unscrew it, and I'm going to show you what I get here out of this. So for the hose reel, it's actually going to be the bolt, a washer, and then a washer and a nut. So we want to make sure we have a washer on each side as we're reinstalling it. So I'm just going to get my hardware out of the way here. Let's go over to box number 2 and pull out a hose reel. So grabbing the hose reel out of the box, one thing I want to mention is everything is going to be color coded, helping you figure out which way this hose reel is supposed to go. We're going to make sure we put the green on the green side, the orange on the orange side. These colors may change, but as long as we're keeping it color coded, we should make sure we're going to have everything put together right. So I'm going to go ahead and line up the pre-drilled holes in the frame with the holes in the hose reel. And through the top, I'm going to drop in a bolt and a washer, and a bolt and a washer. And on the bottom side, we're also going to have a washer going up and then a bolt, like so. Just going to hand thread them here. At this point, this is when my 7/16 socket is going to become handy. So I would just tighten it up like so. The hose reel, since I am going to be pulling my hose on and off and reeling it up, this is something I want to make sure I do snug up nice and tight. I don't want this shaking around on me, or, you know, just the stress from me using the hose reel, pulling on my hose to affect it. So this is an area where I go nice and tight, like I said. Right. Once I get that tightened down, realistically, you can already see we're 99% done at this point. There's really not much more to do, but there are a few more steps that are important. This is when I'm going to get my pair of scissors, and I'm going to follow this line. There should be a hose reel swivel, also marked orange, zip tied to the frame. We're going to go ahead and clip this off. So since it's marked orange, and I know this is my green side, and this is my orange side, that lets me know that this swivel needs to attach here on the orange side. And I went ahead and I pulled the line up through the center of the frame, very similar like I did with this ball valve bracket. And I'm going to attach this here. But at this point, there's a couple things I want to go over. Number one, this is where I put my pipe dope or my thread sealant. I don't really recommend using Teflon here. I actually very specifically like to use my pipe thread. So at this stage, I would apply the pipe thread here. And realistically, I just hand thread this. I don't really put a wrench on here. One thing I always remind people is this is very low pressure at 60 PSI. At that kind of pressure, there's really not going to be much force trying to push this back off. And if we apply our thread sealant, like we're recommending, just hand threading it is going to be tight enough, especially as the pipe sealant cures. We only have one final step at this point, which is getting our hose onto our hose reel. But there is something I want to mention before we go much further. Some of your other components you might feel are missing. They're actually inside of one of your battery boxes. So at this step, I'm actually going to unzip this a little bit here, open this up. Actually, I'll pull it out so we can see it in the video. And as you can see inside of this battery box, I actually have my trigger gun and my hose reel handle. So I'm going to go ahead and pull those out of the box. And this box, even though it's empty right now, this is where your Group 24 battery would go. I'm just going to go ahead and zip it back down. Back to how I found it. Nothing too complicated there. So I actually want to go ahead and put my green labeled hose reel handle on the green labeled side of the hose reel. Just going to pull this thread protecting off. You really don't need Teflon or pipe dope on this side. I would say a little bit of Teflon is actually safe on this side, but you can also use the thread sealant. And we're just gonna, once again, hand thread this on. Nothing crazy. Obviously it's gonna wanna spin on you. You wanna give it some resistance and get it going. I would advise not really cranking this down super tight. Sometimes it can kind of strip some of the threads. I get it on there. Once I feel it's secure, I pretty much leave it there. It's not an area that's gonna have a lot of pressure behind it, so you'll be all right. So now we're gonna move on to box 3, and I'm actually gonna bring my trigger gun with me while I come over to box 3. All right, so while we're pulling the hose out of box 3, I have my trigger gun ready, and the trigger gun should already have a barb pre-installed on it for you. And one thing I wanna mention is the hose should also have hose clamps on each end ready for you. At this point, we're gonna attach the gun into one end of the hose and use our flathead screwdriver and tighten that hose clamp down nice and tight. You don't wanna go too crazy where you're gonna crack your plastic barb, but you definitely wanna make sure it's tight enough where it's gonna be waterproof. At this point, I always recommend you unroll your hose in its entirety, because the next step is just to take the other end of the hose and we're gonna attach it to this barb on the hose reel. Once again, we're gonna tighten up the clamp onto the barb, and then we're just gonna roll the entire hose up onto the reel. Once you've done that, you have successfully built your Stealth Pro 7 gallon a minute soft wash build. Thanks a lot.